Trying to get the here without Lynn's help. What if I back up? Watch out. Watch out, guys. Okay. We have few guests here. You can see there's the Christmas tree. And before we get started, by we, I mean me and two dogs. I'm going to try to turn off one of these lights because it just feels so bright. How's that? That's better. We have a new foster dog named Vigo. That's the name he came with. I have no idea where that comes from. But here he is. Good boy. Good boy. Say hi. He's got funny ears. Hey, see? Say hi to everybody. How do you say hi in Taiwanese? You don't know? He probably doesn't speak yet because he's a puppy. But hey, if you're looking to adopt a dog, Vigo is available. So he's going to hang out here for this quick edition of Trailer Talk. Oh, Chalk is here in the background, so we haven't forgotten about her. I brought my laptop this time because I figured last time I was actually unable to see the comments. And I'm going to move this down even more so that we can see each other a little bit better. Okay. There we go. Whoops, sorry guys. Okay. All right. So I hope you guys can hear me all right. I'm going to pull up my laptop and make sure everything's working. And today I just wanted to briefly talk about some thoughts I've had this last week as I have been working and covering some issues that I think relate to what we're doing with this Airstream. So let me see what's going on here. Sounds like we can hear everything all right. Can we hear everything? Let me know if we can't hear everything. Okay, it sounds like it's good. So sorry about the delay on getting this started. This is only my second live chat here, so trying to troubleshoot the problems. Now I can finally see comments, which is awesome. Again, this is our Christmas tree. Working on a video about how we got it. Actually, kind of a fun story because we got two for the price of one, which was actually free because one of them was poached, actually, as it turns out. But that's going to have to wait through the video. So this last week, hey guys, this is not a poop bag. This is a plastic bag. I was covering the plastic bag ban that's been proposed in Washington State. And I'm going to say hi to whoever's watching. Okay. Questions about the plastic bag ban. If you are from Washington, I'm happy to answer those while we're talking about this. I'll just hold this up. I'll put it in the tree, actually. Then we all have our little prop. How's that? How's that for a Christmas decoration? Can you see it? Right here? Okay, awesome. So, good job, guys. Covering the plastic bag ban this week. And I learned a lot about the complexity of our choices because it turns out that you may hear that banning plastic bags is across the board an awesome thing to do because there's a considerable amount of marine debris like this plastic problems in the ocean. And so everybody's trying to figure out how do you get rid of the plastic problem in the ocean. And one of the things that states like California have done is ban plastic bags. So you go to the grocery store, you pay like 10 cents extra for a paper bag, which they offer as an allegedly better alternative, or you bring your own reusable bag. But it turns out that as I did this research about what's the better option, that actually depends on the poison you want to pick, because a plastic bag actually has a considerably less damaging input when it comes to greenhouse gases, fertilizers, nutrients going into the water, chemical pollution, whereas a paper bag or even a reusable bag can have a considerable amount of problems on the input end. So what do you care about? Do you care about marine pollution? Do you care about greenhouse gases? Do you care about chemicals in the water? Do you care about using lots of water? I found out from the World in Data, which is a great resource if you're interested in learning about all kinds of topics from a data standpoint. It's funny because my colleagues the other day, we started this new initiative, data journalism. And I'm like, what have we been doing before this? Anecdotal journalism? I don't understand, but that's like the new thing is data journalism. It would be nice if we were always doing data journalism. But this is basically the idea is looking at the life cycle analysis of a product and determining at that point with from beginning all the way to the consumer's application of it to the end, what really is the best option. And it gets very complex because actually, if you had a organic cotton bag, you'd have to use it 20,000 times, World in Data says, for it to be worth the same input as just this one plastic bag. So you got to ask yourself, like, all right, so what really is the best option? So then that got me thinking about, as I was asked throughout this, like, what can we do? What should we be doing? And it turns out that consumer application is at the heart of all of this. Like, how are we using what we're consuming? And how much are we consuming that we really don't need to consume? So that got me thinking about the Airstream because part of our journey here is trying to reduce ourselves and our lives down to necessity. Um, Minimalism is kind of like the hipster thing right now in the Pacific Northwest. For us, like we're totally lame. We're not hipsters. We could never could never qualify as that. I don't know if we want to either, but uh, we just want to simplify and reduce our consumption and use multiple times whatever it is that we do consume and just really start thinking seriously about our own individual choices because if you use a plastic bag several times and like you don't use your cotton bag that often, then actually you're being more environmentally responsible with this. The problem with the plastic bag is really disposal. If you dispose of this right and you live in an area that has proper disposal and you use it many times, then you can really make an argument, according to scientists who have spoken about this, that actually you may be reducing total environmental impact by using this. So it really boils down to consumer application. And again, what are your priorities? So if it really, when it comes to living lives that are intentional and making choices that have good effects on our environment and our neighbors, um, why do it if it seems like annoying and just an extra hassle if it's easier to just go along with the way that we see a lot of folks, which is just like not thinking. And, the society's kind of like set up at this point where you don't have to see the consequences of your behavior. So, no harm, no foul. Why even think about it? What's the big deal? Um, but I was listening to Joe Rogan a couple days ago, and he had Jordan Peterson on. If you don't know either one of those guys, definitely check them out. Jordan Peterson's a psychologist, become very popular and controversial for a lot of different reasons, which I won't get into. But he talks a lot about how responsibility gives meaning to life. And so without responsibility, you're not only just less happy, but you actually become well, actually, what he said was you invite little spaces of hell into your life. And that as he's worked with people and he wrote this book and everything about what he's seen as he's been counseling clients over the years, he's a professor as well. Um, that the people who felt like they had taken on responsibility for their own choices and their actions and the consequences of those actions, those were generally the happier people. And that, of course, when you take on responsibility, suffering is involved in that because you don't necessarily find the easiest paths when you just stop skimming along the surface of the lake, not paying attention to what's underneath. You may run into some challenges that force you to stretch yourself. But in fact, he's found that that actually helps the human psyche feel transcendent in a way, like you have a purpose and that your life is meant for something. And it reminded me of a book that was very influential when I was in seminary. So before I became a reporter, I got a Master of Divinity degree from Boston University School of Theology. Go Terriers. And prior to that, I was actually a producer in New York City, kind of gave up the news life, decided I wanted to be a psychologist, went back to school to study psychology and counseling, but I wanted to study it from a theological perspective too, because I really was interested in how people think about sort of the bigger issues, um, not just the brain and neuropsychology, but how the greatest philosophers and the greatest religious thinkers have talked about our struggle as human beings. It's Saint Augustine. I love how he talks about how humans live with the bodies of beasts, but the minds of angels. And so we're constantly in this tension of knowing that we're going to die, um, but having the same kinds of impulses as the beasts, as he would say. And so we live in those two worlds, and that causes a lot of problems for us. Fast forward, I'm in seminary and I read this amazing book, which everybody should check out. It was by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a psychologist. I think he may have also been a neurologist. He was a really smart dude. And he was put in Auschwitz during World War II. He was Jewish. And he lost almost his entire family. I think he may have lost all of his family in Auschwitz. If anybody had the right to grovel in misery and self-loathing and give up, it's Viktor Frankl. But he ended up using his experience for research. He sort of decided to start watching people around him to see who was surviving and who wasn't surviving, who was thriving and who wasn't thriving. And what he basically found, which was why this book is called Man's Search for Meaning, is that those who could find meaning for their suffering were often the ones who made it through. Uh, Not necessarily when it came down to who was chosen by the Nazis, but who he would watch just die, just give up and die, basically. There were people he would watch who were not taken into these horrific gas chambers, who just, the misery of it, they just gave up. And he talks about that in the book, how he would just watch people essentially just waste away. And he was interested to know why some people seem to find a way to overcome it and other people would give up. And that was what he came down to, was meaning. If people could find meaning in their suffering, they tended to do better. And part of a lot of that meaning in the suffering came with responsibility. So that brought me back to my other thought when I was listening to Joe Rogan's podcast with Jordan Peterson, was when Viktor Frankl noticed that, like in his own case in Auschwitz, he took on this idea that he was going to use this to learn and potentially help other people after it was over. So he took on a new responsibility there to find another task to put his, which gave him a sense of responsibility and his own sense of meaning. And what he finally learned was that, and this is his kind of ends it, is that when people have a purpose that's greater than themselves and greater than their one person, that is ultimately how happiness and success happens. He says that if you chase success, you'll never find it. It should always be something that ensues your action. So it follows whatever you're doing. It's not something you're aiming towards. It's a result of whatever you are applying your purpose towards, whatever you're acting towards that's greater than yourself. Happiness comes after that. So if your happiness is your goal, you tend to be less happy. But if helping or being a part of something that's greater than yourself, greater than one person, then happiness comes from that. And so he tells people at the end of his book to not make their own happiness their goal, that happiness can't be chased, it can only be developed as a secondary consequence of participating in something that is greater than yourself, greater than the individual. And so back to the plastic bags here, which you see on the tree if you're just joining in. Um, when I cover environmental issues, which if you don't know this, I'm an environmental journalist in the Pacific Northwest. Oh, by the way, Lynn's not here because he is working in Oregon right now. I struggle a lot with how to tell people what to do because it just depends on where you live. There's so many different things that go into how you can sort of live more responsibly in your own city, in your own neighborhood. But I do think one thing across the board is um, to just think about how you consume and then whatever it is that you consume, how you use it. So, for instance, clothes. Um, if you buy an outfit, try to use it and wear it enough times that whatever went into making it was worth it. Don't throw it away after one use. I have a friend who does sort of do that after a couple uses. I said on live television a couple days that we're frenemies now, but we're not really frenemies. We're still friends. I still love her, but wish she would wear her clothes more. Um, and so when it comes down to our choices, that is always going to be the number one way, in my opinion, to make this world a better place. Actually, a colleague of mine, when we were discussing this, and it was during commercial break, said, "Tell people to vote." And I don't ever tell people to vote. First off, the reason I don't tell people to vote is because I don't know who you're voting for. So I'm not going to just tell you to vote in the same way I'm not going to just tell you to eat meat because I don't know, or just eat anything like eat whatever it is because I don't know what you're eating. I tend to like grass fed pasture raised animals. So if I just tell you to eat meat, I mean, what kind of meat are we talking about? Where did it come from? How did the animal live? Um, I don't just like say go vote because I think it's one of those things that maybe this is bad because my husband's a veteran and I'm proud Americans that have the freedom to go vote, but I don't just tell people to do that because I don't know who you're voting for and I don't know what if you've even researched the issues. The better thing that I think would be to say is read up on the complexities of whatever it is that you're voting on and make sure you're informed before you go to the polls and then go vote. Great. I don't think that for that reason, and also because I'm a journalist, it feels like I have an agenda if I'm like, go vote. So I just don't do that. Plus, to be honest with you, if every one of us individually started really taking an inventory on what we're doing in our own lives, I think we would move things a lot faster than the government can. One great thing about America and the way that our government works is that it can't screw things up very fast because there's so many different checks and balances. But it also doesn't really make change super fast. So I'm not somebody who sits around obsessing over politics because I really do believe that our individual actions are the most powerful, and so that's what I always try to inspire people to think about is that actually, like, you may be wringing your hands or throwing punches on Facebook over political headlines, but how often are you obsessing over, like, what you had for breakfast this morning or uh, what kind of clothes you're wearing or did you help your neighbor get to the grocery store or stuff like that? Because those little actions really add up to big consequences and big systems that in some cases are controlling us in ways that we don't even know because we have relegated or delegated, I guess would be the right word. We've delegated responsibility to people that we don't know and we don't see what they're actually doing with that responsibility and with that freedom. And so if we can pull that freedom back into our own homes and our own families and start actually seeing, because we've made our circle smaller in that sense. We actually know our neighbor. My neighbor and I talk about this all the time. Minu, she's from India. She moved here several decades ago. And she talks about how lonely she is because actually in India where she came from, everybody talked, neighbors knew each other, they helped each other out. And here in this bigger city in America, where we have all of these opportunities to know our neighbors, and we don't have to be scared about associating with each other. We don't, and we kind of we don't do well by that freedom of association when we don't even know people that we could associate with who live right next door to us. I learn a lot from Minu. We have differing opinions on some stuff, but we actually can have conversations because we know each other, and that's how you move. If you're sitting there wondering, like, oh, how are we going to get past this point in political history where everybody just hates each other? Well, one way is to just start like actually having real conversations with real people instead of just like hitting the um, angry button on your Facebook thread when you see your friend posting the latest about whatever political candidate is that you don't like. get off that every once in a while and go actually talk to a real person. And when you start seeing how somebody who may think a little bit differently than you actually has a different perspective because of their life history. Like Lynn is a veteran who fought in two wars overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. He has different opinions because of what he's seen. I would never have thought about some of the stuff he's thought about because I've just never experienced, nor do I want to experience the stuff that he's gone through. But it behooves me to listen to him at least because he has had different life experiences that may be meaningful to the conversations we're having. And if we just write somebody off immediately because we don't even know their life experience, because we don't really know them, then we put ourselves into these echo chambers that have created where we're at right now. So, anyway, I guess the whole point of this is just to say that the whole Airstream thing for us and like the tiny home living and minimalism and all that stuff is, yes, it's a part of this whole idea, which I didn't read these books and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy an Airstream. I'm going to find meaning. But the reality is, like, it is kind of all part of that reducing, reducing our impact on lots of things that we may not have ever known we had an impact on. And then because we have brought the circle of impact closer to home because we either buy from our local farmers or we help our neighbor with her gardening and we grow herbs outside, now we know and can choose and use the freedom of choice that we have wisely because we actually know what we're choosing. Whereas in a lot of cases, our actions, we don't even know what we're choosing because we're like dialing in on something that beeps on the other side of the world, and who knows where it came from or what its life history was or life cycle, like this plastic bag versus the cotton bag I was talking about. And you don't even know the impact because you don't even know where the stuff is coming from. And the Airstream, we want to move this onto our own land so that we can start taking a look at stuff like very simple stuff that maybe we all take for granted: food, energy use. Can we go solar? What are ways that we can? Do we want to hunt? Um, can we make our own clothes? I mean, who knows? The thing is, obviously, like, there's no time when you work an insane schedule because you have to make a lot of money because you live in a big city. That's why you sort of end up starting to delegate the economy of goods to other people because you're just too busy. I mean, we work a lot. And so I can't make my own clothes right now. And I really can't grow my own food. I probably would kill everything anyway because I don't even know how to do it. And that sort of bugs me because in a country where I have the freedom to do all that stuff, I feel like I'm losing out on my humanity in some way by not just taking advantage of that. And when you reduce size, so you live in a trailer that's 30 feet, 4 feet long, and not in a huge house, and you don't have the same kind of energy bills, the same kind of waste bills, you have fewer bills for all other kinds of reasons, then you can reduce the busyness that you have continued on because you don't need all the money anymore. And that's kind of where we're at. Like, if we can reduce our costs and reduce our impacts, then we carve out more freedom. And with it, though, it's not just about the freedom, it's about the responsibility that will come with that freedom. Because, like I said, I mean, if all of a sudden now we're responsible for doing the renovation on this Airstream or taking care of land and the wildlife on that land and our neighbors nearby, because you rely on each other a lot more in environments where you don't have access to all of the city stuff, then that responsibility, it turns out, the experts say, brings purpose and meaning, which also brings contentment. So anyway, that's just the little trailer talk deep dive today. That actually, the benefit of thinking about one's choices is that the responsibility that comes with it is what brings us happiness and contentment and purpose. And so it's not actually a burden. It's enlivening. It's something that, instead of delegating responsibility to everybody else and just kind of coasting through life, which it seems like isn't working out for a lot of people when mental health studies come out. Actually, Jonathan Haidt's an interesting guy to look up. And he talks about how actually, like, the safe space idea is really problematic because cognitive behavioral therapists rely on a certain kind of therapy that forces people to slowly confront their fears. And so if we all are just saying we're afraid of this or this makes us uncomfortable, so we don't want to go anywhere near it and we should have the right to do so, we're actually hurting ourselves because we grow and our brain actually changes when we confront circumstances that are scary and challenging for us. That's definitely what this is. I've never renovated anything. I don't even know how to sew my clothes, much less put together an Airstream. So this is definitely challenging. And it is scary to think about moving to a totally alternative life, which isn't really alternative if you ask my grandparents, but it's alternative for us now. But hopefully that with that challenge and the fear and overcoming that fear, we have an opportunity to do what these folks who have talked everyone back from Viktor Frankl to the psychologists today and use that regaining of responsibility for new meaning and with that meaning the happiness that comes along with it and the ability to ride out those waves that come with life. Viktor Frankl, again, this psychoanalyst who survived Auschwitz and wrote this book about it, Man's Search for Meaning, which everybody should look up. That was at the end of the day, that greater purpose and higher purpose, something besides yourself. So your actions going towards something bigger than you. That's what he found to be success and contentment. So anyway, I hope we have all learned something. I certainly have just by putting my thoughts together, and I hope I have not bored you. So if I can, what I'd like to do is just start doing these trailer talks on Sundays, and especially if I've covered something over the week that has me thinking about it. Again, all my thoughts came from this plastic bag because if you watch the beginning of the live stream, uh, Washington politicians want to pass a plastic bag ban, and next year they're going to introduce a bill. I did some research and found out actually that plastic bags aren't always the bad guy. It just depends on what you're comparing it to and how the consumer is applying the plastic bag and disposing of it. Which again made me start thinking about our actions and why our actions are so important. Because if you use this bag responsibly, in some or many cases, it's actually better than those reusable bags that you get at the grocery store. And so responsibility with action brings meaning and purpose and happiness. That's the takeaway. It was great seeing you guys. I don't see any comments, but if you want to leave anything or questions later, please let me know and I can answer them in the next live stream. Oh, and if you watch the beginning again, you'll see our new foster dog, Vigo, who I don't know, he kept me up whining all night, and a bird just flew into the window and died. So it's been somewhat of a traumatic morning. So I hope I made sense. Anyway, it's great talking to you guys. So I'll see you hopefully next Sunday. Have a great week. Bye.